So we are sitting here on a really sunny day in Iceland, 2 hours ahead of us in Denmark and Sweden, and 12 hours ahead of us in New Zealand with the race after as well. So we have been talking about a lot of really interesting topics. And now, I mean, in this week, I think all over the world, and especially what I am experiencing here in Iceland, there's a lot of laying off people and staff, and employees are losing their jobs. The government here in Iceland is trying to help the companies survive it, and getting on board to helping them, like trying to put them into some kind of a coma, if you can say so. And I just wanted, like, Ray, you have been working a lot with Iceland and the government in Iceland in a project that is like have been going on maybe now for what, 2 years or something. So you know the Icelandic tourism sector really well. You also know, of course, the sector in New Zealand and also in maybe Denmark and Sweden. But what is your thoughts this like moment? How will we get out of this storm?
Well, I hope we don't go into a coma. I think the English word would be hibernation. But look, for Iceland, it's going to be very challenging because there's not a big domestic market to sustain a vibrant and diverse tourism industry. Whereas for Sweden and Denmark, we have at least about half of our industry is domestic, and that revenue will continue to flow through. I think there is one little financial ingredient that will also help in Iceland, and that's the Icelanders who want to travel overseas and were going to Austria for skiing. They won't be doing that. So that is some money that will flow back into the Icelandic economy. And the challenge is to get Icelanders to spend that in the tourism economy. And part of that, if it's very similar to New Zealand, is to get domestics to spend on attractions and activities. Because our experience is that domestic tourists spend a lot on accommodation, food and beverage, but they're quite light on their expenditure on touristic attractions and activities. So that will be one of the challenges.
What is your thoughts on this, Signe? Is it like the similar in Denmark, where like the short term would be domestic market and that people would be like spending more money?
Well, I think that's definitely the strategy that you see the destination is communicating and DMOs are really looking at is of course the expectation of a rise in domestic travel, and then based on that, how do we make money on it? How do we get them to use the touristic attractions, as you also say, Ray? I think that's definitely an interesting thing, because we've been talking a long time about how we get tourists to go more local, you know, how the authentic experience and spend the day as a local. And now we actually want the locals to spend the day as a tourist. And I think that's it's quite
reversing it.
Yeah. So it's more or less the same strategy that you see in Denmark and in most of the European cities and destinations that I've been talking to. That's the impression I get, that you're looking at a domestic strategy to sort of boost and get started again, I guess is the right way to put it. But then I agree with you, Ásta. I think perhaps especially these past days, I think now people are really starting to realize that this is not just a question of a 3-month hibernation and then we'll be back to normal. We're seeing airlines laying off people, airlines going bankrupt. We see, I think TripAdvisor just announced yesterday that they're laying off 900 people, or at least a lot of people. And so now we're really seeing sort of the consequences, and that will not be rebuilt in 3 months. You know, it's a long-term effort, and we're looking years ahead before this will resemble what we knew, or maybe something completely different. I guess that's also what we're going to talk about. Yeah.
But do you see something like, Daniel, do you see some, I mean, it's hard to talk about opportunities when we are like situated like this, but do you see like really short into this future that we are looking into now? I mean, who needs to do what? And I mean, where do we start when we are in this like kind of turbulence?
Well, I am working with some various destinations in giving advice and really, putting effort into destination development since many years in that sense. But I feel you need this short-term plan and long-term plan, and that is always like that. That is what it is when you talk about destination management planning. And now you really feel that, as I say, a lot of things happen in short time in many fields. You can also see that could happen now within the destinations and within tourism, and like things about how you actually build up your brand as a destination to be more like established as a destination. Things like that doesn't have to stop. It is, as you say, it is like coming out of this crisis strong. Every investment you do now is just building a stronger, kind of destination feeling also within the locals, that you actually build not only for visitors but for the locals themselves. And of course, looking more into the domestic markets and how you do that, depending on where you are situated and located, what unique assets you maybe have. I am working with some destinations that have one asset of not having non COVID patient registered at all, and that is one of their assets. Or that you have a vast nature and a lot of space, for example, and things like that. And outdoor tourism is something that you can see is trending now, and I think will also trend post Corona.
Yeah. And that, then I mean, like Iceland and I mean the Nordics in a way, New Zealand of course, which is like we are twins sometimes when we look at the nature in New Zealand and Iceland. Yeah. I mean, these destinations must have some advantage in the new like kind of ways that people are thinking. Or what do you think? I mean, and I'm also thinking when this all starts to loosen up and every destination and country and government is like putting a lot of money into marketing and trying to stand out of this crowd, right? Because you have been working in this tourism sector for many years and you have a lot of experience and have been like advising governments. What would you think, would be the best like kind of strategy in this, just to put millions and millions in marketing and shouting out? Or how can we start kind of like thinking how to do this now before everything opens up and everything?
Well, I think what we're experiencing here is that our national marketing agency, whose sole job was offshore, has been tasked with doing some domestic promotion. My view on that is basically that the only beneficiaries of that will be design companies and marketing channels, Google, Facebook, and some of the newspapers, and that tourism itself will actually be a really limited beneficiary of that, because it's not as though there'll be no desire to travel and experience new and different things. It will really just be the ability and the opportunity to do that. So to Daniel's point, I've just come off a board meeting today. We're actually 12 hours ahead of you, Ásta. So we've already had all day.
I'm sitting on an empty office right now.
So I've had my cups of coffee. What we are trying to do is really align the experiences that we offer with some critical target groups. And as Daniel's pointed out, you know, the outdoors for urban environments are going to be far more attractive. For many families, it's going to be cheaper and free experiences. Our high net worth individuals are still going to want luxury experiences. So how can you provide that unique and personalized experience inside the portfolio of things that you offer? So we're really looking closely at how we pinpoint our marketing and pitch a particular message to a particular groups. The risk is that what we're going to face is a lot of competition about very general marketing and like national campaigns, you know, go on holiday, see the country, etc. And I'm not sure that they're going to generate more demand than already exists. We're in a position of lockdown still, and it's just changed slightly, and we've got a few more weeks to go. So everybody's wanting to get out and about.
I think one of the things that I've seen from New Zealand as one of the first has been that I think it was the tourism ministry that set down a task force to look ahead as well and say, well, now that we're sort of rebuilding tourism, what do we want to do differently to ensure that we have better sustainable tourism ahead as well beyond the corona crisis? So is that something that you've been part of or?
It's only just been established. And the interesting thing is that our National Offshore Marketing Agency has been tasked with the role to facilitate that. And one of the questions arises about, is this a program of marketing rather than necessarily a reconsideration of what our actual product offer is?
Okay.
Really
early days.
Yeah.
Well, I think at least they're saying it, you know, because it's not, you know, I would hope that it was more than that as well in the longer term. But I think there is very much a focus on what is possible right now, and like you say, we're looking at, well, what are the possible segments, what's needed to get them to, you know, make use of the touristic offerings in a domestic audience, what do we have, and so on, and lots of plans for marketing to get people who've been cooped up inside, to get them to go out, which I think will, as you say, Ray, will be somewhat of a natural thing. But I do, you know, the intent that's behind saying, well, what do we want to rebuild? And I see like a surge of that right now. Like I saw what's the, you know, the Alpine Austrian, the Alpine ski resort, where that was a big sort of breakout of Corona. They came out and saying, well, when we come out of this crisis, we don't want to be a party tourism destination anymore. So you have these, like, they're taking this and saying, like, no, what do we want to be or what don't we want to be? And I think that's the interesting conversation. And I haven't seen a lot of destinations, unlike New Zealand, who were one of the first ones to do that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I thought of this place also. I think it's pronounced Isk or something. I'm not really good at that pronouncing, but I actually thought this must be the safest place to go to when this is over, because they must go through every, you know, line. And I mean, maybe I will not go there next winter, I don't know, but I think that, yeah, this is exactly right. And more because we are so stuck in this status quo that we don't know anything and we don't know what to plan, and actually it's really sad if we don't know what we want to be, because that is also so important now to sit down and because we have kind of an empty you know, paper in front of us. We can almost write down our dream plan now and start to work on that. I know that is simplifying things, but I mean, it's almost like that.
Maybe that's the best basis actually to strategize. You're rid of the arrogance of thinking you know what's going to happen. Is that I think that often corrupts a strategy process if people are too set and they know, no, we just have to do this because it worked last time, so it will work this time. So this time, maybe less arrogance and more, you know, open-mindedness. I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
I think one of the positive things to come out of this is recognition of communities about what tourism offers into many communities. Now, for some, that might be over tourism, and they would say, well, we just want to have less visitors or a different type of visitor. For other communities, it's very much about the vibrancy and viability of the community. And so I think in terms of how we look forward, it's about how we engage all sectors of society into that planning conversation, rather than it being what I guess I've sort of more observed, is it being an economic consideration by the tourism sector, rather than necessarily how we connect with society, how we engage with, you know, different cultures, and what's the, you know, environmental footprint right at the beginning. So I think it'll be a richer and more sophisticated or complex conversation, but the result should be a better result for everybody.
Yeah, and built on sustainability, like you're like describing.
I think one thing that we were talking about here last week, we were talking about like how people's mindset is just like changing when you look at the positive effects, you know, on climate from less traveling as it is right now, and also other you know things. I mean, we were talking about the fact that you for first time for 100 years can see Himalaya from New Delhi, and that is like, why would people want to go back to normal when, you know, where the pollution makes it impossible to not see Himalaya? And we were putting it almost, I was thinking a little bit like, it is almost like the whole of the population of New Delhi have suddenly got reading glasses. Like they have slowly got, you know, slightly worse sight, and then you get used to it after a while. And then when you buy reading glasses, then you realize that, oh, is this how bad it was somehow? And that effect is not to underestimate, I think. And that is something we are looking at and have been talking about for many years, on how we want to kind of change the system, not only within tourism, but also in urban planning and use of our environment, and how retail and how, you know, industry looks like. And then we need to think smarter in how we are using the public funding to prevent maybe costs, than rather than react on the problems. And it has been quite much like we are using a lot of the public funding just to react on problems that are there because we have not prevented them. So also in connection to tourism, we have been talking about invisible burden from tourism, like what do you actually calculate as costs from tourism and incomes. And most often you just look at the income side and you forget many of the costs.
I guess one of the challenges is to embed that mindset in future decision making, because if I look back before the GFC, around 2006, 2007, environment was becoming more and more important as a consideration in tourism thinking at that time. And I don't know if it got to the Nordic countries, but we had people in England saying flying is a sin. And there was a whole period of food miles when people were looking at their food and saying, oh, why has this piece of meat traveled 10,000 kilometers to get to my dinner plate, and so forth. That all completely disappeared in the GFC. And suddenly there was a switch to just the economics of tourism. And I know we were under pressure to just, spend all your money on marketing. That's the thing you're here to do, to grow the industry. And it's really only the last couple of years that environment has come back onto the agenda strongly, and really the community social license to operate has really only come on as a result of the, in quotes, hotspots of over tourism, and sustaining that more diverse agenda when the tourism industry will struggle over the next few years, and keeping all those dimensions in the conversation is going to be a real challenge in the face of the pressure to have economic profitability.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I think it's a very good point. I think there's also a level of, I think this is also the time for tourism to show its credibility.
Yeah.
Because in a sense, if we go 5 years ahead and we tourism, and when I say we, I mean tourism, prioritized economic benefit over actually doing what you're saying and taking all the dimensions into consideration, then in 5 years we will have no credibility if we say now we really need to have sustainability in mind. This is kind of the ultimate test, I think, in a sense. And I saw this a platform from the UK that it says, did they help? And it's kind of a scary thing, actually, but it's a platform where you can go and you can search companies, organizations, even like celebrities or public figures, and then that it will show you what they did during the COVID-19. So did they do anything to help the situation? Did they do anything good? Which is, it's a little bit scary to think of, but it just got me thinking again, what did tourism do? And the same question, I think, will come up in 5 years unless the tourism destinations actually take this opportunity to consider all the dimensions, as you say, Ray, because you'll have no credibility in 3, 4, 5 years if you didn't do anything.
No, and it's not like you have a choice. I mean, sometimes I think people are just like sitting back and they are angry about the situation. This is unfair, and this is, I mean, people are losing their jobs and there is no revenue, and I mean, but nobody has it in tourism anywhere. I mean, we are all in the same boat for that, and we need, I mean, everyone wants change, but nobody wants to change in a way. I mean, it's hard to change. You need to do a lot of things and so on and so on. But now we are kind of there anyway. So there is no choice to sit back or wait until this is over, because I mean, you have to be a part of the, the path that needs to be taken now. So and that is kind of also how can we keep the mindset of the business owners there? I mean, they are people that are losing their stuff. They are people that are losing their money, and I mean, it's so hard to get them inspired to be thinking like this. I mean, I know the municipalities and I know the government is like the public owners of everything, but the private sector is like really I mean, yeah, that is my like big question. How can we keep them motivated in thinking forward in this situation?
Well, I think Daniel had the point before about connecting with the locals, and certainly that's where we're starting. About these tourism businesses employ, the children of families, in the community. They put money into the community. They support the local, vegetable growers, the local transport agencies, and really try to get that connection about how tourism is not something in a box off somewhere in the corner. It's very much part of the fabric of the communities. And so, when people get into difficulty, it's going to be felt by everybody. But the other side of that coin is when things are good and successful, then the community as a whole should benefit or will benefit as well. So it's really trying to understand those connections that are very strong, but have never really been made clear in tourism planning or tourism strategies. about how interconnected, you know, the societies, the culture, and tourism are, and how they're often they can be really mutually beneficial, and not just being helicoptered in from somewhere else and just using the community as a venue for some business that's got a wall around it, because I think those ones will fail. It's those ones that are connected and engaged which will succeed. That's one of the things I think that we can do better.
Absolutely.
I can't help but I think we talked a little bit about it last time as well, like what will be sort of the don't know if stigma is the right word, but how will local communities perceive tourism? Because of course now they've experienced communities without tourism and they've seen the economic benefits and to societies, but then also, and perhaps especially for places like New Zealand or Iceland where you have to fly in, the tourists were also sort of the virus spreaders, and they've been very much exposed as such in the media. And so I'm wondering a little bit if local communities will be as hospitable as they were before. And as you said, like we need them to connect, and the tourists should come in and not use it as a venue, but then we could also see a rise in more exclusive, like separating the two. So let the tourists do their thing and then do it in their exclusive hotel far away from us, and then let us be locals in our local communities here. And then keep, you know, that there are two different movements, I think, and I would like the one that we're talking about, but I do also see this coming in some, like Hawaii, I think, have been very much like of that mindset, saying, well, please go home, we'll pay your flight ticket to leave the island right now. And so, you know, we have that scenario as well.
Yeah. And hopefully that is the short term, you know.
Hopefully.
I think though, like when we look at like how it is and has been before, I mean, in Sweden we have, of course, public transportation as trains and such in another way than Iceland has more public transportation as flying in between different places. Of course, you also drive, but it is a very different kind of tourism that is maybe differently, you know, socially accepted as part of a tourism ecosystem. If you fly also international guests, most often you're building bigger hotels, more exclusive kind of tourism, like most often as you see in domestic tourism. In my experience, is more like campsites, and you're traveling together with a family and a camper van, and we need to think more in how we are making business from different kind of tourism, and tourism sometimes is a collective expression of a big industry, like, but it is so many different kind of tourism. If you're traveling together with friends or with family or a backpacker and such, and that is important to address. And I mean, will this also mean that like you're competing more in between destinations domestically rather than, you know, collaborating and look at the international market and work towards the international market together? And what does that mean? It doesn't have to be bad, but in another way, like you can share on each other to actually build up your own unique identity from your own unique assets. I mean, in Iceland, you are traveling there, many of the international tourists come both to Iceland and northern Norway and such for the northern lights, for example. No Icelander travel around Iceland to see the northern light. That is a totally different product. You need to work. No.
Try to sell us that.
And what food do you want to serve on the restaurant? That is more like, yeah, not for, and that, but I think that is still so important also towards an international audience, to be real. serve what is real and show your own face. I think that is what I believe in the long term. So we cannot continue to just build artificial kind of tourist products, and we just need to be ourselves, and it is not harder than that, but it is sometimes really hard to be yourself. I can say that personally with myself. So.
Yeah. Are there any final thoughts from you, Ray or Signe?
Well, it begs the question, who is Daniel today? But
we never know when we meet him. He's always playing some role.
Look, I think, Signe, all of these dimensions will come to play. There will be a lot of people who are looking for the authentic experience of the destination, and that's exactly what the more sophisticated traveller is going to be is looking for. Communities, we already saw it because we stopped travel from China first, and then suddenly all the Chinese restaurants had a drop in patronage. And why was that? Because for some strange reason they thought that, you know, coronavirus had jumped off the plane and got into Chinese restaurants or something. So there is a whole lot of that stigmatizing or putting tourists into a category, and no, we don't want you in our community, and particularly if they look different to the resident population. And so I do believe, yes, you're right, that is a real risk. So again, I think is, you know, part of strategies. It's about being welcoming to all sorts of visitors, all types of people, all from all sorts of societies, and not discriminating. There's always things to learn and exchange between different nationalities, different countries. And whereas if you're in crisis, you tend to retreat and lock back into things you know, things you like. So I think keeping an open mind is going to be the challenge on that one. And yeah, I think we've still got a long way to go. Our thinking is at least a couple of years out, and possibly 3 or 4 years.
Mm-hmm. It would be nice to have this, you know, button to move really fast forward, but we don't want to miss this opportunity of staying in this kind of craziness, I think.
Agreed.
Yeah. But I know that I'm no Martin Luther King, but still I have a dream that that this will you know, lead us to something that is better than it was before. I mean, we had a great stuff here before. We had a lot of innovation in tourism and tourism and tech and everything. I know that some of that will maybe be really hard to continue now. But I also know that we all over the world, of course, have a lot of creative people that will use the ground that we are on now. We have a strong ground everywhere in tourism. I mean, it's not everywhere the same, but we, like in the Icelandic Tourism Cluster, we are really much trying to move forward with this and try to get people on board on thinking towards the future of this. I mean, there's a lot of people that are and all kind of organizations that are in the moment trying to you know, shut down the fires and everything like that. But we want to really get people on board of thinking how they can use this opportunity now to step forward and do the changes that are needed. And I just wanted to thank you all to join this informal Unplugged talk, and hopefully we can continue with all kind of talk that will you know, be in this same line of thinking bigger and thinking forward in this all. So yeah, thank you for that for now.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Ásta.
Thank you.